Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 19 of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Christina Hagen, coming to you live from Cape Town. We have over 140 episodes recorded and available on YouTube, so if you miss out because of load shedding or your Tuesday nights have become busy, never fear, you can always catch up later. Tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome Clifford Dorse to the show to share some of Cape Town's biodiversity with us. Clifford Dorse is the head of conservation services for the city of Cape Town, but he may be more well known to some of you in the birding community as an amazing birder who regularly guides not only pelagic trips, but also bird club outings and various other trips. But Cliff is also more than just a birder and has a wide-ranging interest from plants to insects to snakes and frogs and everything in between. He has actually just finished a book with his wife Sarita on the fauna of the fynbos, and it is being published by Strake and will be out in the next month or so. So that is something to look forward to and get your hands on if you are interested in the fynbos. So we're very lucky to have him with us this evening to share some of his knowledge and the work that he does for the city of Cape Town. So Cliff, thanks very much. Do you want to start sharing your screen? And you can take it away.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction and kind words. Thank you very much to BirdLife South Africa for the opportunity to talk about a passion of mine and obviously my career, but the wonderful biodiversity we have in the city of Cape Town and the massive challenges we face into conserving our unique heritage, our natural heritage in this part of the world. And we will hopefully show you some slides soon. So yes, thank you. I will talk for about 40 minutes or so. There's a lot. I could speak for days on any one of these items, and people who know me will realize that, but I will go through it fairly quickly and simply. A lot of it's quite in-depth and complicated, but I'm just going to sort of cover the main points. And then there will be time for questions at the end. So thank you so much for joining me. And the talk is on the biodiversity planning and implementation in the city of Cape Town. It will be of a shock to many to know that we actually have a plan, and we do plan. And the key is developing the plans, one thing, but implementing it is actually the real challenge when it comes to conservation in South Africa and around the world, in fact. So yes, my name is Clifford Dorse. I work for the city of Cape Town. I used to manage nature reserves, which was a lot of fun. And for a while now, I've been running up a section called the Conservation Services Unit, where we do lots of things from restoration to monitoring and evaluation, all sorts of things. But the particular expansion and the conservation planning are two of the things in my job portfolio that I really enjoy and I'm very passionate about. And that's what this talk will be about tonight. I was very impressed to see how many international people have joined today. So I went straight into the conservation, the biodiversity significance of Cape Town. But I think most people will know that the Cape Town's in the Cape Floristic region, the CFR, which is an amazing special biodiversity area in the southwestern tip of Africa, and it includes the winter rainfall regions, and it has immense, unique and endemic biodiversity in that area. And within that is the fynbos biome, and within that sits the city of Cape Town. It's basically in the heart of the fynbos biome. And it has been referred to as the most biodiverse city in the world by the United Nations Thomas Elmquist. And it's also known as one of 36 biodiversity hotspots recognized by Conservation International. And a biodiversity hotspot is a site with an area with very high biodiversity and endemism, so biodiversity only found there that is very threatened. And there are 36 of these around the world, and the fynbos biome is one of those. There are 20 vegetation types in the city of Cape Town. And that's very important. And it's a fundamental message that we need to get through to people. Not every piece of vegetation is the same. And in Cape Town, we have a mosaic of 20 completely different vegetation types. And each one requires a different level of conservation significance and action. And very importantly, 11 of them, so more than half of the vegetation types in Cape Town are critically endangered. And I'll explain what that means later. And 7 are endangered. and 7 of them, so over a third of the vegetation types in Cape Town, are only found in the city of Cape Town. So they're endemic to the city. And 5 of those are critically endangered, which is really scary. It's amazing to think most cities in the world, you can conserve the region's biodiversity in a national park 200 kilometers up the coast or inland. In the city of Cape Town, we can't do that because the biodiversity is unique to the city boundaries, a lot of it. We have over 3,000 plant species in the city of Cape Town, which is an immensely high number. It's indigenous plant species for a municipal area. We have, to say it another way, we have a sixth of South Africa's plant species in 0.1% of the country's land surface area. So clearly a high concentration of diversity down here in the southwestern tip. There are 190 plant species that are locally endemic to Cape Town. So they don't occur out of the boundaries of the city of Cape Town. So they do not occur outside the municipal area, which means if we're going to conserve them anywhere, we have to do it here. There are unfortunately 660 odd plant species and taxa, including the subspecies, that are threatened with that are red list. So that includes near threatened, and of those, 405 are threatened with extinction. So that's vulnerable, endangered, or critical. And we've already lost 49 species in the city that are no longer occurring in the city. And 14 of those are globally extinct. So the rest do occur outside the city still, but 14 are gone. Some do occur in cultivation, and we're trying to put those back, but many of them are gone. Coupled with the amazing floral biodiversity, we have a rich small mammal, frog, reptile, and invertebrate faunas. And it's very notable that we have 4 endemic frog species. So there are 4 frog species that are only found in the city of Cape Town, all associated with the Peninsula Mountain chain, one coming onto the Cape Flats too. And we have, of all the vertebrates, we have 52 species of conservation concern, and 29 are considered threatened. There's a Ramsar site, which is wetlands of international importance. And the city has recently also been recognized as the Ramsar city. So a city with very important wetland attributes. There are 3 World Heritage sites that enter the city of Cape Town, or are in the city of Cape Town, and 3 biosphere reserves, which do enter the city. And then some critters on the right that are found in the city, obviously Cape Rock Jumper, a Cape Cobra with the classic background of Table Mountain, arum lily frog, and then that little butterfly at the bottom is a Barber's Ranger. It's only found on the flats at Muizenberg, between Muizenberg and Strandfontein, and it's critically endangered. At one stage, there were less than 10 individuals, but now there's over 100, but it's still hanging on. So just to go into the vegetation types that are found in the city of Cape Town, this is a list of the 20 veg types, or we call them veg types or vegetation types. So you will notice when you look at the name of the vegetation type, it often refers to the substrate. And that is key in determining what the plant community that soil will maintain. So it's sand fynbos or granite fynbos or shale fynbos, alluvium fynbos, granite renosterfeld. So that is why we have such a high diversity of vegetation types, is because we've got a huge variety of edaphic types, soil types, and where that soil originated. The national threat status, you'll see the red list ecosystem 2022, endangered, critically endangered, down there. How many of those? It's can I hide that? So the ones in bold are the endemic vegetation types. So those are the ones that are only found in the city, and you'll see 4 of them are on the peninsula. Peninsula granite fynbos, Peninsula sandstone fynbos, Peninsula shale, and Peninsula shale fynbos, and shale renosterfeld. So 7 vegetation types only in the city. And I'm going to explain a little bit why or how a vegetation type is considered threatened, or you know, when it's an animal, you can understand a threatened animal. There's not a lot left. There's been a massive reduction in the population, and it slowly gets rarer until it's critically endangered and on the brink of extinction. But how does that work for a vegetation type? So national targets are set for different vegetation types. So SANBI does that for all 440 odd vegetation types in the country. And as I said, 20 of which are in the city. And the BioNet remnants, so the little patches of natural vegetation on the left, are the only chance of making these national conservation targets. And unfortunately, for several vegetation types, it's already too late. So the target is X, but we have got half of X. So you can never meet the target. And that's when it becomes critically endangered. So how do they measure or come up with these targets? So let me see if I can, sorry, I'm trying to find the pointer. Ooh, apologies. Pointer options, laser pointer. Okay, so if you consider if the area, if you conserve 100% of the area, the original extent of a vegetation type, you will conserve 100% of the species. So species on this axis, area on this side. And as you lose area, you lose species. And where the national targets are set at where that curve would be 70% of the species. So you're basically saying, well, you're probably going to lose 30% of the biodiversity, but you will conserve 70% or a representative sample of the biodiversity. And that's a species area curve. So in species poor habitats, where there's not a big change rate of change in over the landscape. So from one side of the country to the other side, it's the same 10 species of tree. You can conserve a representative sample of that biodiversity in a small area. In the fynbos biome, where we have incredibly high alpha and beta diversity, so that's lots of species and a high rate of change in species. So one mountain compared to the mountain across the valley have got different species on. That's beta diversity. It's hugely different. We need a much bigger area to conserve that representative sample of 70% of the biodiversity. So the old target in the 80s was 10%. If you conserve 10% of your land surface, you'll conserve the biodiversity. That is not enough for species-rich ecosystems, not by a long way. And for fynbos types, they're typically between 20 and even up to 35% of the original extent. So some vegetation types, to actually conserve something meaningful, we need to conserve a third of the original extent. So it's a bit technical, but it just gives you an idea where these percentages come from. I'm going to go through 3 of the endemic vegetation types in the city of Cape Town to show you how dire it is. And one of them is a good news story. But Cape Flat sand fynbos. So if you look at the left-hand side, you'll see the sort of the rough area of the city of Cape Town, and the red patterning is the original extent. So it formed this H-shaped pattern, and that's because this vegetation type occurs on well-leached soils that have become acidic. So it's acidic sands, and that's sand fynbos, acidic sands. And you'll see it runs sort of from Princess Vlei, the northern side of Rondevlei, up to the M19, people won't know, but up towards Blouberg, and then across the Cape Flats to the eastern parts and down to sort of Somerset West. The bit along the coast is all more recent sand, so it's alkaline and supports Strunfeld. The bit to the north became clay and it supported Nosterveld. So this vegetation type was confined to this H shape. And unfortunately, it's on the lowlands. It's on the flat lowlands, which are great for development and urban sprawl and many other threats. So when we are on a peninsula here in the city of Cape Town, we can't develop in 360 degrees like you can in Gauteng or Pretoria. We've only got a little way to go. So we don't have much options. So Cape Town has sprawled into these Cape Flats in the past and continues to be, and there's a lot of pressure, critical pressure for development. We need to develop. We're we have lots of socioeconomic challenges we have to meet, so we have to facilitate development. But what has happened is the national target for this vegetation type is 30%. We have 7% left. A lot of that is very poor along the west coast. It's very degraded through alien vegetation, too many fires, and all sorts of other things. And we've only got probably less than 2% conserved. Most of it's at Blouberg Nature Reserve. This is pictures Kenilworth Racecourse, which is a beautiful wetland site. Lower Takai has got sand fynbos, and then in little patches around. So a really, really highly threatened vegetation type. And what this means is every bit that remains is needed for national targets. So no matter how small or degraded, we need it to try and meet national targets. We can't meet national targets. We can't even get a third of national targets, but of the national target, but it is needed. So that's what the science says. So even a road verge with a little quick plant community that still constitutes Cape Flat sand fynbos is significant. This one's probably even more sad because it had an even smaller range. This is Lawrenceford alluvial fynbos, and that occurred on, it's a wetland vegetation type. It occurred on the floodplain of the Lawrence River. And because it's such good land for agriculture, it was transformed very early when settlers arrived in the Cape. So lots of vineyards and orchards and things. So a lot of this was developed in the upper catchment, and then urban sprawl around Strand and Somerset West has transformed a lot of it. So also only about 7% remains. It's actually probably a lot less than that. Some of what we mapped previous years, Lawrenceville and alluvial fynbos, was in fact Swartland, Shell, and Osterveld. And we have 3% conserved in a little reserve called Harmony Flats Nature Reserve, which is spectacular for spring flowers in August, September. And we can never meet targets. So critically endangered, and we actually pretty much don't have too many options left for this veg type. And then another more interesting, more successful story is Peninsula Sandstone fynbos. So this was the vegetation type that occurs on the sandstone-derived soils on the peninsula, Table Mountain, Cape Point, all Cape Peninsula Sandstone or Peninsula Sandstone fynbos, and 97% remains. So we've only lost 3%. Some of it's quite degraded, but we've lost 3% through some agriculture and some development, and 94% is conserved within the Table Mountain National Park, which is iconic, wonderful, amazing asset to the city of Cape Town. So the key message here is the target is actually a minimum threshold. When you get to 30%, it doesn't mean you must stop. It means that's a bare minimum. If you can overachieve, you're doing very well. And we would hate to lose any more of this. And luckily, most of it's secured in the Table Mountain National Park. What's interesting, it's still critically endangered. And why that is you can a vegetation type can be critically endangered because it's so transformed, like the two I showed you before, Lawrenceville alluvial fynbos and Cape Flat sand fynbos, or it could be critically endangered because there's a high number of endemic and highly threatened species. So it's flagged as critical so that when there's development pressure or something happens, it's looked at very carefully to make sure that there aren't any very special plants in that footprint. So that's why vegetation types that are still largely intact can sometimes be classified as a higher status, like critical. Okay, so historic versus current extent of vegetation types. You'll see this is a mosaic of the different vegetation types in the city of Cape Town, all 20 of them over there. And this is what's left on the right. You'll see the lowlands are white. So all the white areas are transformed. That's a Fisher-Knodo Gap, obviously the False Bay coastline, and most of the Cape, the agricultural areas in the north. So the northern areas were Swartland shale and lovely for wheat, and were plowed up quite early. And then the Cape Flats were mainly for urban sprawl and development. But so there are big areas left that are intact. The Peninsula Mountain Chain, as we saw, some areas around Atlantis, which are very important because they're lowland areas, and then the Kogelberg, Helderberg area, Helderberg Basin on the east. The problem is that the big areas that remain are mountainous, and this is a problem throughout the fynbos biome. The lowlands are underconserved and highly transformed, so highly threatened and not protected, where the mountains are largely intact and fairly well protected. And that's because the old conservation planning was water. Save the mountains, that's where the water comes from, which is great, and you can't argue with that at all, and we really need to do that. But the biodiversity on the lowlands is unique and different. So we can't conserve our biodiversity by only conserving the mountains. It's the lowlands are very special. And that is where we have a conservation crisis in Cape Town, because we have very little of those vegetation types left on the lowlands. Okay, so what are the impacts of losing our natural heritage? So what? It's going to be nice, but we didn't. Why? Or we're not going to. What's the problem? So the loss of priority biodiversity areas to meet national and international conservation targets. We have signed up to many different things saying we're going to try conserve a representative sample of our biodiversity. We report on it in many different scorecards at various levels of government. And we've even trying to conserve 30% by that 30 by 30. I don't know if people have heard about it. So countries around the world are saying, let's try conserve 30% of our lands, our surface and marine areas by 2030. Massive challenge, but great to have a good target. The loss of public open space. So if you go to a community that has no public open space, or at least safe open space, it's a terrible place to live. We really need to look after these open spaces, not only for the biodiversity, but also for people and the opportunities they provide. So in the middle of the Cape Flats, you will have a beautiful dune area, like the Macassar dunes. It's not safe. Very few people use it. But if we lose that asset and that value and the potential there now, it'll be gone forever. So we need to conserve places for the potential they hold, and then unlock that and make sure that those areas become assets to those communities and to all of us. Loss of corridors and connectivity. In many parts of the Cape Flats, we've lost those opportunities already. We sit with isolated small remnants that aren't connected, and in other places in Atlantis and on the Peninsula Mountain chain, we can still get our linkages in. But once you lose that connectivity, you increase the management requirements and the complexities of management much, much more. A small nature reserve that's isolated and surrounded by urban sprawl is much harder to manage than a big wilderness area. Much more expensive, and it also has less amenity opportunities. So loss of ecosystem services, this is a really big one, especially here in the city of Cape Town. We have coastal setbacks where if you build within the coastal zone, and we saw 2 weeks ago, massive swells and seas did a lot of damage to our coastal areas, and that's because we built in the wrong place. So rather avoid it and not build in those places to protect the infrastructure. And in our wetlands and our flood-prone areas, the Cape Flats is a large wetland, most of it. And when these floods happen, it can be very, very dangerous and life-threatening to many people. So to have to engineer these ecosystem services once you've lost the naturally functioning ones costs a lot of money, and sometimes it's not possible. Threat to our water security. We need to protect our water. In 2017, we almost ran out of water. Day zero was looming, and we were all panicking. And if we don't protect our catchments for our dams and our aquifer recharge areas, it will only make it harder for us into the future. So we need to protect those. Risk to climate change resilience and adaptation. The Western Cape is well known to be a very vulnerable area to the effects of future climate change. And how we plan and develop now will make us resilient, heading down that road into those challenges which are coming. And the loss of amenity value and potential amenity value, as I mentioned earlier. So these places are very important. One of the nice things about COVID, the only very, very few nice things about COVID, is that as soon as people were able to go 5 kilometers from their houses, our reserves were absolutely inundated with visitors, and that trend has continued. So people that didn't used to visit the reserve down the road started, and they still do that. So yeah, we have to unlock that more. But the big issue is if we don't develop sensibly, Cape Town will not be a sustainable city into the future. And when everyone asks, why has the city of Cape Town got a biodiversity management branch, and why are you doing protected area expansion, is because we need to be a sustainable city into the future. We at least need to try. Okay, so the purpose of biodiversity planning. So we want to conserve a representative sample of all the biodiversity pattern, including species and their habitats. And that's the principle of representation. As I said, for some we can't, like Lawrenceford alluvial fynbos. Too much has been lost already, but from where we can, we must do our best. And the ecological and evolutionary processes that allow this biodiversity to persist over time. And that is connectivity, making sure the reserves are as big as possible and well managed and restored. Okay, so I won't dwell on this too much, but what is a systematic biodiversity plan? Okay, so it's a scientific method for identifying geographic priority areas of biodiversity importance. It involves mapping biodiversity features such as ecosystems, species, spatial components, and ecological processes, and mapping a range of information like condition, what if it's high condition remnant or low condition remnant, setting up quantitative biodiversity targets, and that we use the national biodiversity targets that we mentioned before, that SANBI sets across the country for all vegetation types, and then analyzing the information. So it runs through a computer program called MarkSan. It's a GIS-based program, and it selects sites in order to the most cost-effective way to reach those conservation targets. And it spits out a map saying, this is what you need to try meet your conservation target. So it'll, in a nutshell, you'll put in all the remnants, the condition, the rare species, the connectivity, the edge, the surrounding edge effects, land, all the information you can put into the program. It will analyze and if there's a choice, so it can meet the conservation target for Cape Flats sand dune strandveld, say, and it's got a choice of two. If the one is outside the urban edge, it'll take that one rather than selecting a piece in the urban edge. If it's connected in better condition, part of a corridor in a flood-prone area or in a coastal protection zone, it'll select that. So it uses highly defensible rules to select and come up with the plan. So this is what you need to try meet or get as close to those national biodiversity targets as possible. So in effect, it's us putting all the biodiversity cards on the table and saying this is what is ideally needed. Okay, so so the configuration of priority areas is designed to be spatially efficient, i.e. to meet those biodiversity targets in as smaller area as possible. And remember, our conservation targets are big. So 30% for the fynbos types and Renosterveld types. Renosterveld's 26. But yeah, so they are quite big. So we actually do need quite a lot of land surface to try and meet those. And as I said, to avoid conflict. So if it's on a priority mining area or agriculture area, it won't select that remnant unless it really has to. Basically, I'd rather select something that's outside the urban edge, outside the way, and not in the development footprint of the city, where possible. So these maps that are produced are called CBA maps, or critical biodiversity area maps. And that's a term we use across South Africa, CBA maps. And there are also ecological support areas. So you'll have your critical biodiversity areas that are selected to meet those targets. And then interspersed and linking those would be ecological support areas, where it could be even transformed fields that are critical for fauna movement to link to CBAs, or it could be unselected natural vegetation. So maybe a sandstone vegetation type that is well conserved or are still quite common, but it's critical in terms of linkages or buffering. So those are ESAs, or ecological support areas. Spatial representation of a systematic biodiversity plan and what is needed for national conservation targets. So that is exactly what it produces, that CBA map. And in doing so, it identifies a set of biodiversity priority areas. And yeah, it's all repetition there. I don't need to go into that. So Cape Town's BioNet, based on all those things I said before, it looks, that 2018 version is what is on the right there. We have recently rerun it. So sorry, I'll just go into this first. So the important thing, and when I said we put our biodiversity cards on the table, we need to show the city and everyone where the important areas are, where are those CBA areas, and we need to try avoid them as the city grows. So you can't say no development, but rather a directed development and other activities to more suitable areas will have the least impact on biodiversity. Obviously, you can't always avoid biodiversity, and there's an EI process, and you have to get in point specialists and go through the whole process, and you can't always avoid biodiversity, but we really need to try our best. And we also need to make sure that the accurate information is on the table, and when difficult decisions have to be made, that they're made with the correct information at hand. So the BioNet informs action. So it's improved land use decision making. So from a spatial planning perspective, the city does use it, and I'll talk a bit about that now. We use it for protected area expansion. So where should we be trying to get a new nature reserve or new nature reserves? We look at the BioNet. If it's a CBA, that's where we want to go. Prioritization, implementation of ecosystem restoration. Obviously, we need to do a lot of restoration. A lot of our biodiversity is highly degraded and impacted. And to even get close to our national conservation targets for most of our vegetation types, we're going to have to do some restoration. And all municipalities in the country are obliged to develop a legally binding spatial development framework, or SDF, that indicates the desired patterns of land use, ensures sustainable development, and provides strategic guidance for development and conservation. So the BioNet forms an important informant of those SDFs, and then it is also adopted by council, and EMFs are adopted by DEDP, which is our Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, who are the competent authority that deals with development applications. So the BioNet is in there, and if it's actually widely available, if you Google it, you will find it out there. So we rerun it. We've just rerun the BioNet. So obviously, from a 2009 was our first BioNet, and we've obviously lost a bit. We've discovered some new remnants, and we've conserved a lot more. So currently, the left-hand one is a terrestrial biodiversity network. So the green blobs are what is already conserved. And then the red ones and yellow ones are the CBAs that we need to conserve, and the white is obviously transformed. And on the right is the aquatic BioNet. It includes critical recharge areas. So that's the Witwatersrand aquifer near Atlantis in the north. And in the south is the Cape Flats aquifer, which are very important informants. And this time we've also added a 10-kilometer buffer. So on the edge of the city of Cape Town, we've got this 10-kilometer buffer to ensure that we have adequate buffering and connectivity of the city's protected areas. The biodiversity and ecology doesn't stop on the city boundary, it goes on to the other side. And we need to work with neighboring municipalities and Cape Nature across those boundaries and in that buffer area. And also, it gives us more opportunities for offsetting and other ecological compensation, which I won't go into now. But often is in a development application, there might be an offset requirement. There's very little left in the city. So looking at a bit of a bigger area can give more opportunities for actually mitigating the loss or impacts of the development where possible, and to conserve certain ecosystems and species, which obviously neighbor the city. We've also included the major water supply dams and a buffer of 1 kilometer, and that's in recognition of the city's reliance on on ecological infrastructure and ecosystem services from outside of the city's boundary. So we're not an entity on ourselves, especially when it comes to water. We're absolutely dependent on the outside catchment areas. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, the city area is only 2,500 square kilometers. So in terms of South Africa, it's a small area, but yeah, 2,500 square kilometers. And obviously on the edges, the BioNet, the city's fine scale plan, or the fine scale plan for the city, merges with the CBA maps from the Western Cape biodiversity spatial plan. So there is integration with the CBA planning inside the city and what happens outside. Okay, so together it forms this lovely BioNet on the right, and you'll see the nice green areas, which are what we want to protect and conserve. And there's a whole part of our branch's work is ensuring that those reserves are adequately managed and properly managed and assets to the communities, which I don't go into this talk at all. But we really need to make sure that the biodiversity doesn't degrade. We don't want to have paper parks, which is unfortunate reality in many areas. You paint the area green on the map and you think it's done, but no, it still goes backwards. And we need to be very sure we don't let that happen. And we need to really work closely with communities through protected area advisory committees, make sure the reserves are well used in a sustainable and compatible way. But that's a whole nother thing. So this is the Dussenberg coastal catchment area on the left. That's Kanonkorp near Atlantis. And we have a wonderful opportunity to link that to the coast through the Witwatersrand Aquifer Nature Reserve down to Kuberg Nature Reserve and Bokbai. So it's an area of 25,000 hectares. So it's the same size as the Table Mountain National Park, potentially. Critical landowners there are the Marmara community. They own 7,000 beautiful hectares in the middle. And we really would love to make this a reality while we still can. It's one of the only areas in the Western Cape of high quality lowland vegetation. So really, really critical. And it was actually identified as one of the 2 most critical climate change corridors in the province. It's a really important area. So what is the status of this BioNet? So as of the 30th of June, 65% or 55,000 hectares can be considered conserved. So the BioNet is 85,000 hectares. We use the original extent of 85,000 hectares, which was the 2009 BioNet, and we measure against that. So in 2009, 34% of the BioNet was conserved, and in 2023, 65% is conserved. So we've done fairly well. The city of Cape Town has 22 protected areas. And I'll show you a list of those now. We have 30 stewardship agreements with private landowners. So we were the first municipality that developed a stewardship program where Andre Rousseau and Jacques van der Merwe are excellent, and they work with private landowners to conserve biodiversity on their land. They've done incredibly well, and we've got 30 signed up stewardship agreements across the landscape. We have 16 biodiversity agreements with the City of Cape Town Recreation and Parks Department. So it's a line function within the city that owns some very nice areas like Rondebosch Common, critical for biodiversity, critical recreational areas. We've also had to be innovative. Often in an area, the whole offsetting space is a very complicated area, but loss is sometimes unavoidable, and sometimes offsetting or mitigating that loss in other areas is actually a greater gain. So we've developed Atlantis Conservation Land Bank, which allowed us to achieve huge conservation gains. And we're also developing one, or have developed one, in the Metro Southeast around Macassar Dunes, or the Cape Town based people, Macassar Dunes and Macassar Estuary, which is facilitating development for our human settlements colleagues, particularly, but allowing us to really secure some critical CBA, the critical biodiversity areas. The city does have a green infrastructure program, or GIP, which incorporates a BioNet, but it also incorporates other open space. So it's basically a metropolitan open space system that includes parks and tree rows and all other green important spaces, and the Biodiversity Network is entrenched in that. And as we mentioned, the City of Cape Town New Water Program is aligned to the new BioNet, especially the recharge areas for the aquifers. And of course, the city protected areas provide significant job creation, skills development, education, and recreational opportunities. And that's a whole talk by itself. But these spaces aren't just there for nature, they're there for people. We are a city. We have to make sure that our residents gain value and understand the value of these protected areas. Otherwise, we'll lose them into the future. So conservation land in Cape Town, so that 55,000 hectares I mentioned. Just a breakdown, the City of Cape Town has about 17,500 hectares, about 20% of the BioNet. Sandparks has 25,000 hectares. That's a peninsula mountain chain. They only have one reserve in the city, but it's a very important one. Cape Nature have two, Kransekral in the north, which is a developing reserve, and then the Hottentots Holland Nature Reserve, which comes into the city, but it's accessed from the other side, from a Grabo side. And unfortunately, they had a very important reserve called Drift Sands Nature Reserve near the airport, which was deproclaimed last year following extensive invasion during land invasion during COVID. So a really tragic moment. And if you look at the city of Cape Town, in an area where there's an absolute paucity of protected areas, so that is a huge loss. And then our stewardship sites, only 2.7%, but that's a very, very important part of the pie, those private landowners. And then Eskom, Kuberg Nature Reserve, there, number 3 there on the map, that's about 2,800 hectares. So that's just how the breakdown works. And of course, note is that the mountains are well conserved. The lowlands is a big gap, and that's where the issues are. I won't go through all of these, but these are proclaimed nature reserves, 16. We are in the process of proclaiming 6 new reserves. The report's actually going to council in October, 17th of October, I think it is. So hopefully they'll say, go for it. And then we'll be going out for public comment. Please feel free to comment positively. And then we will also be expanding 9 of our nature reserves. So we've been quite lucky in being able to get new pieces added to these 9 nature reserves, which are already there. Okay, so implementation going forward. So as I said, we are on 65% now, and we're on the mayoral dashboard that gets reported up through national government, and we have to say how much of the BioNet will be conserved in each year going forward. It's very difficult because we don't know what's going to happen, if we're going to get some budget for land, if we're going to sign up any nice landowners, or what tragically happened, we deproclaimed. Drift Sands was deproclaimed, which really set us back, and we had to subtract 0.5%, which means we didn't meet our target. So the going is slow. So if you think signing up a 10-hectare new stewardship site sounds like it's a great achievement, everyone's happy, we have tea with the landowner, we sign an agreement, it's all wonderful. But to get 0.1%, that a 10-hectare signing will only be 0.01% of the protected area, an increase of 0.01%. So it's very, 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 very slow. But each hectare is worth the effort and critical. But it just shows you. So you think, well, like in a year, you're only going to go up by 0.25%. But that is quite significant, actually, in terms of the land in Cape Town. It's very expensive land in many areas, and it's very difficult. So we're chipping away, and we will see how close we can get into the future. Okay, so the last two slides, just to summarize, in a nutshell, of the 20 vegetation types that occur in the city, 11 are critically endangered and 7 occur nowhere else on the planet. We need to recognize this to appreciate the full challenge of trying to conserve this wealth of biodiversity in a rapidly developing city. So if you've got a piece of Cape Flat sand fynbos, it is really important, even if it's small and degraded. And that's why the greenies get worried and upset. It's not because I often say, listen, I wish we didn't have to fight for this piece, but it's all we have left. So that's the reality, it's a fact. The only option for future sustainability and quality of life is to make sure that the built cultural and natural environments are integrated. And we can't stress that enough. We can run ahead and deliver on housing opportunities, but if we will just build houses and not communities and not lovely places to live. Cape Town is a wonderful place to live, but not for all Cape Townians. And we need access to high quality, safe open space is a critical part of that quality of life. And time is running out. We need to act now. We should have acted 50 years ago, but it's going to get harder and harder. So there's no time like the present. Let's chip away. The protected area network helps make our cities sustainable and resilient through the ecosystem services provided by nature. And I know I've mentioned that a few times, but that really is a key take-home message. We're doing this for Cape Town. For Cape Town to be sustainable, we need to conserve the green open spaces that make us sustainable and resilient. And people need biodiversity. So it's not only for the survival, as we rely on essential ecosystem services, but also for recreation, stress release, general health and well-being, employment, income generating opportunities and education. And City of Cape Town is a unique and desirable place to live and work. And we really need to make sure that's true for all Cape Townians and not for the people that live in the leafy suburbs. Okay, final slide. Just to stress, the BioNet is not a city product. It is the fine scale plan for the region. So it's Cape Nature's plan, it's Sandbee's plan, it's National Parks plan, it's the plan. So the city drive and lead it, but it's a scientific product that it's everyone's plan. It's the plan for the region. It's a fact. So it's based on legislation, scientific data, best practice, and expert input. So we have been, there has been indications in the past that we need to change our opinion, and we're like, well, it's not an opinion. It's what's there. It's Cape Flat sand fynbos, and there's 8 threatened species. That's the fact. That has to be on the table. It has to be part of the decision-making process. And very difficult decisions have to be made in many cases. We understand that, but we need those facts on the table. And the BioNet is a key informant in all integrated spatial planning, products, and decision-making. And we really need people to understand, if you're commenting on a development, look at the BioNet, see what is there, what is the factual stuff on the ground saying, is this the right place for this development? It's not about, what's in my backyard or what's happening in my neighborhood. It's what's physically there. And that has a lot more clout and adds a lot more value to commenting on these processes. And the BioNet is the least land hungry option. So it's not like we're trying to be greedy and take up all developable land. It's what is needed, and it's on the table, and it's because of the way the systematic conservation plan runs, it aims to be the least land hungry option available to meet those targets. And it's the best option to keep Cape Town sustainable into the future. And just to remember, Cape Town is the most biodiverse city in the world. We must protect this treasure. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Cliff. That was an amazing overview of what you do and the challenges, but also the successes that have been achieved. So well done, and thanks very much for that. Before we move on to some questions, I see there are quite a few questions coming in. Just a reminder to please put them in the Q&A box rather than the chat feed, as it's much easier to monitor them in the Q&A box. And then just another reminder that we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with another webinar, and this time it will be by Samantha Ralston-Payton, who will be speaking about her work on renewable energy, focusing on wind energy and impacts on birds. So Cliff, I hope you're ready to answer some questions. There are quite a few coming in. shall we start with Michael Rampetti's question about whether the systematic conservation planning factors in possible changes in land tenure and how you mitigate against loss of corridors and fragmentation of land?
No, so it actually it takes first and utmost the biodiversity value. So only when there's a choice, it'll take threats into account. So if you can meet targets, then it'll go, oh, this bit is really like in the urban edge and in a prime industrial area, so it won't select that one. So it doesn't look at tenure at all, but it is a factor when it comes to implementation. So there's some low-hanging fruits that are really easy to get. We can work with willing landowners and other landowners that are, I mean, they're hardcore developers, they're boarded for development. Then then we have to go through the normal processes of the EIA processes or just negotiating. But no, so that only comes into effect when negotiating or implementing, should I say, the BioNet.
Okay, great. So Penny Abbott asks about the draining of the Cape Flats, which presumably has occurred, over the years and sort of more historically as well. And presumably this has had a major impact on vegetation. Is this impact reversible, or are we kind of stuck with what it is now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, I mean, we've done some wetland restoration, rehabilitation of infilled wetlands at Zandvlei, a small area at Rondevlei. Dalton Gibbs has done some great work there. So there's small little bits where you can, and wetlands. I mean, if they're filled in with rubble, it's amazing. You can remove the rubble. Nick Fordyce and the Friends of the Liesbeek are doing a lovely project along the Liesbeek River now, in fact. So there are little gains. But what we've lost on the Cape Flats was we don't even know what we lost on the Cape Flats, coupled with very poor apartheid play. Is highly significant. So the impacts on the aquifer are huge. Many areas the aquifer has been polluted because of in inappropriate land use above it. So it's largely irreversible, and what it does do is the wetlands that remain, especially in Lower Takai, there's a lovely river, and in like Kenilworth Racecourse, it's got beautiful wetlands. It just makes those so much more significant and important. So some opportunities for restoration, but unfortunately, very little. Sorry.
That is quite sad. So Etienne, on that theme, Etienne and Mariana ask what can be done to restore the banks of the Kells River, if anything.
Yes, so the Kells River with catchment hardening, obviously there's huge issues with flooding, and then obviously when there's rubble or water ice in the river, then it blocks under bridges and it creates huge flooding risks. So and in many places we've developed or invaded too close to the river, so we don't have the options. Like at Drift Sands Nature Reserve, the Kells there is really in trouble. But there are plans to move those people out of harm's way and hopefully make a better corridor. The Kells needs, I mean, it's the biggest river in the city of Cape Town. It's a significant river. It joins with the Easter River and runs out at Macassar East, which is an area that's very special to me. And I really want to see Macassar sorted out. And the way to do that is to fix the whole river. So I think definitely in some areas, and there is a program in the city called Livable Urban Waterways, where they are looking at certain rivers. I know they're doing the Sand and a few others, but I'm not sure if they're looking at the Kells. But I can find out and get back if I get the contact details. But yeah, it's a very challenging one, but a very important one. Includes the Bottleray stream and many tributaries in that Kells. So it needs attention, and I think there are places where it can happen and should happen.
Okay, that's good to hear. Let's hope that it is on someone's list. So Ted Vermeulen asks what might be a bit of a controversial question. It's a controversial development. So feel free to pass on the question if you can't answer. But he basically asked, with all the rules that are in place, asking about the Amazon development at the River Club site. How did that come about? So I don't know if you do want to go there. It has been quite a controversial issue in Cape Town.
Yes, it has indeed, for many reasons, and of course, it's in the flood-prone area of the Liesbeek and the Black confluence, so an area that is very vulnerable. It went through the processes and did get approved. I wasn't involved. There is quite a bit of potentially good work in softening the banks of the Liesbeek. I know the Cape Bird Club and the Conservation Committee have been quite wanting to get involved in making sure that is an improvement. So trying to get some benefits out of it. But yes, as I said earlier, there are some areas where difficult decisions are made, and often, we as environmentalists are not happy with them because the facts are on the table and the decision is made. So yeah, I can't really say too much more than that, but yeah, there are some losses, and that is indeed one that did go ahead, but we need to make the most of it and make sure that whole Rapenburg bird sanctuary, the lower Liesbeek and the Black River, there's still a lot of beautiful habitat there. It's in fact one of our city parks biodiversity agreement sites, and maybe Amazon will come to the party and help us fix it all and be a corporate sponsor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are opportunities in that area to try and improve the situation there. So let's hope that can go ahead. And as you know, I've recently joined the Cape Bird Club Conservation Committee, so hopefully we can get something done there as well. So there are a couple of questions asking a bit more about the drift sands deproclamation, which was a massive blow, asking whether Sitembeso asked whether there's any hope of ever reproclaiming that area, or is it now gone forever?
Yeah, it has been deproclaimed, and probably maybe half of the area has been invaded, or more probably.
Oh, wow.
But there is a lot of it is very important flood-prone area. So there's actually city infrastructure there in terms of a flood attenuation dam, which is designed to flood. So it's like a terrible place to live. So people do have to be moved out of harm's way and given better areas. So that flood-prone area is not suitable for development. So what form of open space that flood-prone area takes into the future is currently being decided and up for. It's provincial land. It's not city land, but there are opportunities there because it has to be open space. So it has to be green in some form to fulfill that flood attenuation function, and whether that's a nature reserve or just some form of open space, it has to be open space. So watch that space. It's a very good question and an interesting question. There is still some biodiversity, but again, the flood-prone area, the flood-prone part of that system is critical. We can't actually develop there.
Okay, that's good to know. So on to another controversial topic, if you don't mind. A guy, Arkel, asks about the Takai plantation area. If it were to be felled, the pines were to be felled, how much would it add to the Strandveld conservation estate, I guess?
Right. So yes. So that is a very topical conversation. So there's the upper slopes are granite, so that would have been peninsular granite fynbos, which is endangered, and then lower down, so Cecilia Forest and Upper Takai, and then the lower Takai bit is Cape Flat Sand fynbos. So that's the really, really, really critical one on the acid sands. And the one good thing about pines is they're quite forgiving on the seed banks. So if the area wasn't plowed previously and you pines, and you can have 3 or 4 rotations of pines, and the seed banks are intact. So after the pine clearing, Cape Flat Sand fynbos does regrow. And the fact is, it is very important. And as I said, every little piece is needed to meet those national targets. And it isn't a national park. So it's probably, I'm trying to think, below that road, it's probably 70 or 80 hectares. So it would be one of the biggest pieces of Cape Flats and Fynbos. Kenilworth Racecourse is 40 hectares. Bloberg Nature it's probably the third biggest piece, yeah, it's in the top 5. It would be one of the top 5 biggest remnants. I wouldn't be able to give you a percentage overall, but it would be significant in terms, and there is quite a nice piece there. I mean, that bit that has been restored is
Yes.
big and significant. I know there are still some trees on the periphery and on the edges that, and there is a lot of discussion in terms of going forward on that land use. Will it be artificial shaded area, or would it be returned to it's something our national parks colleagues are very much busy with?
Yes. So Alistair Stalker is asking about the threats to Cape Town biodiversity, and saying surely the 2 biggest ones are massive immigration and population increase and the projected sea level rise over the next 25 to 50 years. Would you agree with that? Or what do you see as the biggest threats to Cape Town biodiversity?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Globally, the biodiversity threat is habitat loss. So future climate change is a big one, and we don't really know, but today is habitat loss. So transformation of Borneo for olive, for what's it, oil palms,
Yeah.
whether it's urban sprawl on the Cape Flats, habitat loss is driving species extinction around the world. So by far the biggest one. And obviously huge immigration into Cape Town and a lot of pressure. It's a lovely place to live, and we have to develop better. We have to develop denser, and that would alleviate a lot of the pressure. You know, these huge low density sprawling suburbs that aren't actually good for humans. They aren't good for schools and services and all those other things. Sea level rise, our colleagues in the coastal management branch, Greg Olofsson and his team, are doing excellent work with the coastal setback line. So they are looking at that and trying to make sure, and luckily in many of our areas, our coastal setback is very good. Around most of the peninsula, it's great. On most of the False Bay coastline up to Strand, it's very good, and then Strand, it gets really bad. And even on the west coast. So there are places that are very vulnerable, and we saw that with the big storms now. But we actually, Cape Town's got 307 kilometers of coastline, and a lot of it's still in pretty good condition. And yeah, the coastal guys are doing great work there with that coastal setback line. So it is being looked at. But yeah, any climate change impacts are actually secondary to the big driving force of habitat loss. That is really the one globally that needs to be managed.
Absolutely, yeah. Then, sorry, this person is just on a Galaxy phone. It doesn't show the name, but asking about small conservation areas, whether the plants, whether you move plants around between conservation areas, or if there's threats of development. Yeah, so do you move plants and I guess take them into captivity or cultivation, whatever the right word is for plants?
Yeah, so it's another great question. So, I mean, a lot of people think very small conservation areas are not viable, and yeah, viability is a very strange concept. So the Peninsula mountain chain isn't viable for leopards anymore. A shame, it's almost not viable for baboons because of us humans. You know, but it's still spectacular and contains 99.99% of the biodiversity can function quite greatly. But as you get smaller, a site becomes less viable to other things. So a 2-hectare site, or our smallest nature reserve is 6 hectares, which is tiny, but and it's not viable for even porcupines. It's too small to support porcupines, but it supports Silkreet Renosterveld, which is really special, and it's got carpets of bulbs and annuals that are really special, and they will persist. But the smaller you go, hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
It's beeping, something's beeping hysterically in my ear.
Oh, that's weird. I can hear a faint beeping, but I wonder what that is. Are you still there? We seem to have lost Cliff for the moment. Are you back, Cliff?
Am I back?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I think someone tried to Skype call me. Sorry, apologies, and it just cut me out. So these small areas will require more management. So in some
Mm,
areas, the specialist pollinators are gone. So there's this really
yes.
wonderful long proboscis fly. If it's gone, there's a whole range of species that won't be pollinated, and you have to
Mm,
hand pollinate. I mean, it's
mm,
that is why the size is really important, and connectivity and doing proper planning, and where
yes.
we have these tiny remnants, but we can't give up on them, and they just require more management. We get friends groups to help us. We will do some genetic interchange of some of the plants maybe into the future. Um, but yes, we need to bank. So we have the Millennium Seed Bank, which is run by Kew Gardens. We're trying to make sure that is every species is banked in a seed bank. But all of these things, anything in captivity or cultivation or in a seed bank, it's pretty pointless if you don't have its habitat.
Absolutely.
You need to be able to put it somewhere and have it as part of the ecosystem. But definitely we want to bank things to make sure that we have a fallback.
Yeah. So related to that, a question from Pauline asks whether your program or anyone in the city works on encouraging people to plant the appropriate indigenous gardens to try and assist with developing corridors, helping pollinators move, etc. Is that something that is useful? Is that something that is encouraged?
It's a really great idea. So there was Bongani Manisi was a colleague of ours. He ran a project which I can't pronounce. Anyway, it's just sunbirds, and he focused on schools between Rondevlei and a few other sites linking to the mountains to try get sunbirds to move through these corridors. It was
Mhm,
a great project, and we have a sort of a guideline that we share with developers and people that say what to plant and not what to and what not to plant
mhm,
near a nature reserve, or your protected areas. And definitely indigenous gardening, not using herbicides and insecticides. Porous fences is a huge one for
mhm,
leopard toads and all sorts of small fauna. There are many ways that we probably don't do enough of it. There's a lot of groups out there. There's Fynbos Life. There's quite a few private people that are really pushing that, and we encourage it, and it's great to do that kind of thing. And what's interesting is sometimes you think you're doing the right thing by planting indigenous, but it can have a bigger negative impact than planting petunias. So if you're living next to a nature reserve and you go buy yourself some hybrid proteas from an outlet, a nursery, and you plant them, and the sunbirds and the sugarbirds can move pollen, and you can end up contaminating the indigenous ones. So and people don't know. They go to the indigenous section and buy all these lovely things. On a
mhm,
mountain chain, the agapanthus are hybridizing because people plant praecox, which is the one from the eastern parts of the country, and it spreads into the veldt and it hybridizes with the indigenous little one, Africanus. So it's not as simple as just plant indigenous. Actually, obviously water-wise and long as it's not invasive, there's sometimes even alien things can be useful. But we do have some guidelines, but it's probably an area that we need to develop more. I think it's a good point. And we do have a people and conservation program where we have people on the reserves that work with the communities around and try to get to be better neighbors from both sides. But that is a point, and I think needs more attention from our side.
Yeah, that would be, I think, a useful sort of resource to provide to city residents. We just have a few more questions, if you don't mind hanging on for a few more minutes.
Not at
Um,
all. Sorry, not at all.
Great, yeah. So again, someone, I can't see the name, asking about what's happening with restoring rivers and water areas such as Milnerton Lagoon, and if there are any plans for public access improvement there.
Yeah, so that's our mayor, Gordon Hill Lewis, is a huge priority. It's a mayor priority program to fix Mornington Lagoon. In fact, our three recreational water bodies, which for some reason the Biodiversity Management Branch manages, that's Zandvlei, Zeekoevlei, and Milnerton, and Rietvlei, Table Bay. That estuary has been in a very poor state for a really long time. The Deep River, which is a huge river, most of it outside the city boundaries. There's obviously impacts from the sewage food works, stormwater impacts, agricultural areas, and that is in a terrible, terrible state. So there is a program looking at dredging that estuary and removing a lot of that silt that's there. But yeah, so there's definite money being spent, and huge money in upgrading the Port Stump sewage works. Yes, so there is definite attention being paid there. And as I said, it's an absolute priority for the mayor. So let's wait and see. But yeah, huge things will happen there. Certainly, I'm quite positive that there will be marked changes in the next few years going there. Obviously, there's tenders and all sorts of processes that happen, which take time. But yeah, there will be action there on the ground quite soon.
Okay, great. That's very good to hear. Then we have a question from Shashi asking how you survey these areas and kind of keep track of all the biodiversity, asking whether you use satellite imaging and drones, or what methods do you use?
Yeah, so the original mapping was done with satellite, with like Google Earth, basically, and then also any changes. So if we suspect something's gone down and something's been removed, Google Earth is a very valuable tool. And a lot of the area you can see quite easily from the roads. Obviously, you need landowners' permission to go check out anything, but we generally have good contact with all our landowners that have important remnants. And unless there's been marked disturbance, the biodiversity is pretty constant. So it's pretty resilient. If it doesn't burn too frequently, or if there's not heavy grazing and trampling is a big threat. So that is something that can impact on it. And we try go, especially this time of year, August, September is the best time to assess the condition of the veld. We do a lot of, especially with very threatened species, where we've only down to a handful of individuals, things like Proteodorata. We do a lot of monitoring to make sure they're still there, and that's there's quite a bit of special species monitoring that happens annually. And then we use crew, custodians of rare and endangered wildflowers. They're brilliant in helping us, keep track of just finding out what's on different remnants, and also monitoring how they're doing. The bird lasser, great data, especially in the city of Cape Town. Birding Big Year, that's been run by the Cape Bird Club, is a wonderful source of data for us. And I think the key for us, INAT, I don't know if people use INAT. If you don't, you really should. It's a wonderful resource. There's huge volumes of data that come through there. And the trick for us is to make sure we keep all those informants, and we keep track. But yeah, so we pretty much so we know when a site's going backwards. We know where the big threats generally. Sometimes we're surprised and disappointed, but most of the time we sort of know what's going down, and we have a lot of reserve people on the ground. So our protected areas, we know we do METS, which is Management Effectiveness Tracking Tool. We do that every 2 years on the protected areas where it's assessed to make sure that the reserve isn't going backwards.
Yeah, and I know you have lots of very hardworking colleagues throughout the biodiversity grouping of the city of Cape Town. So they're working all working very hard to keep track and managing the biodiversity in the reserves. So we'll just do one last question from Penny, saying, "This is impressive work. Are any other cities following the methods applied by the city of Cape Town?"
Yes, that's so. I mean, the systematic conservation planning is often done at a provincial level. The Cape Nature do it for the rest of the province. For me, implementation is actually easiest and best done on a small scale. So if I worked at Cape Nature across, from the whole Western Cape, it would be very hard to focus on small little remnants, because there's so much to do. So I think implementation is better at a very small scale. Sorry, no, that's not answering the question, but just to say, so I know eThekwini has a very good program and a team running there. But Cape Town's also very unique, so we have more pressure and more biodiversity that is found nowhere else. So it's a lot more critical for us to be really on top of it. So I think that, yes, there's great work being done across many of the cities globally and in South Africa, but Cape Town is unique, so we need to be even more on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great biodiversity assets, but also a lot of challenges, which you've highlighted as well. So I think we'll leave it there. So thank you very much, Cliff, for sharing your knowledge and your work with us this evening. And thanks very much to all the viewers who've joined us. Cliff, I don't know if you have any last sentiments that you want to pass on to the audience. Otherwise, we will end off.
Yes, indeed. I just want to thank so many people for joining. I saw it was over 200. So really impressed. Everyone gave up their Tuesday night to listen to me waffle about Cape Town's unique biodiversity. So I really appreciate everyone's time. And thank you for all the people that asked great questions. Very thought-provoking and pertinent questions in there. And thanks to you, Christina, for you did very well hosting. It was great. And to BirdLife South Africa. And it was wonderful for the city to have an opportunity to chat in your conversation conservation conversations, which I often find a tongue twister. And just to say, I must acknowledge my colleagues, Charmaine Oxterby, who works with me in the CSU, and then Andre Rousseau and Jacques van der Merwe, who do a lot of the on-the-ground particular expansion, and all the guys that are actually on the ground managing the reserves. They do an amazing job. So real team effort. And thanks to everyone for giving us the time to chat about it tonight.
Indeed. Yeah, thanks very much. And keep up the good work. And you're doing fantastic work, which people have been complimenting you in the chat. So I'll pass those on to you. And thanks very much. And please, everyone, do join us in 2 weeks' time for another Conservation Conversations episode. And we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Good night.